All right, so welcome back to the second session of the Google Slides Beyond the Presentation STI class. We are recording this, so it'll be available later for review and just follow up and things of that nature. Do a little housekeeping real fast, just to remind folks of where everything is. So everything I do is on my blog, and what I'll do is I will post the blog link, to this course's page in the chat, but I also share the screen real fast just to remind everyone of where it's at and what it looks like. So this is the blog. There's this STI drop down. We're under Google. We're the first one right here, but this is what the page looks like. Has the agenda, talks about eventually we'll get to the participant projects, resources for the course, and then this is actually a video. And if I was on a more stable internet connection, you can actually see the video replay. So this is where all the resources are going to be for this. What we'll do is let's touch base, and any questions based on last time, we'll do a little review on the things we left off with, which is sort of objects and moving things around and kind of creating those, using shapes to create characters and sort of starting to make comic books. And we'll review some of that and do more with that today. But anyone have any questions, any thoughts from last week? Amanda.
Yeah, the one issue, and I know I asked this question last week, but I wasn't successful when I was working on my character. I couldn't figure out how to like flip shapes. And I know you showed it to me, but when I tried to do it myself, I was hopeless. So
No problem. No, it's really easy. So, and this is why we sort of do things like these characters, and I'll use the actual Google drawing, is because whether it's slides, Google, or Google drawing, everything is a shape or an object, right? So even a text box is an object and it has the blue boxes around it. So if I were to just put in like this smiley face, let's say, right? So that's an object. It's in this box. Now you take, and text will be in a box like this. Every shape is a text box. Pictures will show up in the same blue box. Corners will bring it down, right? You can stretch it with the middle. You want to be careful about stretching it. So to rotate an object, first thing you would do is this little blue ball at the top. If you click and hold on that, you get this little like plus sign. Press and hold, you could turn that. That will rotate the object. What you could also do so that's sort of rotating it like on its one axis. Yeah. If you wanted to flip it, you would take, let's say, the middle box and bring it all the way down through itself and then back to the other side.
Okay. All right. So it's grabbing that box. Yep.
Yeah. So it's this little circle right here, and then you can rotate it around. And obviously different things will look, a different type of object will look different if you bring it, through itself to the other side. It'll change how it looks. But basically, you always want to look for this little circle above that top center box, because then that will be what allows you to twist it. And what's nice too is if you look closely at it, it actually gives you a degree with which you're turning it. So if you wanted to go 90, you literally just go over and sort of fine tune it and get yourself to,
oh, that's cool.
That's 80. So 80, there's 90, right? So you can actually pay attention to those degrees. You want to go 180, you literally just come down here and just look at those numbers, and that's 183.3. So that's 180, right? So now that's helpful, because even if you're not, even if you're working in Google Slides, it's still the same concept, because everything in Google Slides is an object, so everything can function the same way. The other thing, just while we're looking at this, is some objects will give you, some shapes will give you these little diamonds. Those little diamonds allow you to change the perspective of that particular thing, meaning you can stretch it or like squish it or tweak it. So you can go like super smiley face to super frowny face within it. So if you ever see those diamonds on things, they allow you to fine tune and adjust. So like this is one, or it actually gives you two diamonds, so you can like adjust one, and adjust the other if you wanted to line up shapes in a very specific particular way. you could use those little diamonds to adjust certain elements of certain shapes. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, what else? Any other questions, comments, follow-up from last week? All right, cool. So what we'll do is we'll do just a quick review, which we've already started, but basically what we were talking about last week is the notion that you can do something in Google Drawing, like make a character using shapes. Because then what you can do is you can actually take your Google slideshow and not make a slideshow, but make a comic book where you take that character and then start dropping that character in. Now, as that loads, we'll just remind you that I recommend if you're going to do something like this, especially with students, they should just draw the character as is here. No embellishments, no speech bubbles, nothing like that. You can always add that in Google Slides because Google Slides has all the same tools. That's one of the nice things about slides is that it gives you the ability to create visually in it. I like to create something like a cartoon character separate in Google Drawing just to keep it like kind of clean and keep my mind sort of focused on what I'm doing. Once we come into here, we talked about how you could then paste your character in. Now, this is an example right here of what I did was I took this character and in order to make it look at the other one, I just took that middle box, I pressed it, and I squished it all the way through itself, and that changes the direction that it's looking. And that's when you would take the box and bring it all the way through itself to change the orientation of something like the nose or the mouth or how it's looking. So this is where I make the, the background, the setting. We talked about how this is talking about beyond the presentation, which is literally going beyond these walls, going beyond the edge of the slide. Because once you do that, nothing gets seen. So when you look over here on the left, you have this slide sorter. You can see that we don't see this curve of the circle. We only see what actually goes inside the slide. So that's part of the literal component of this class about thinking outside the box is if this is the end of the slideshow, when the audience sees this, the audience is not going to see all of this stuff out here. They're not going to see that. Their visual is going to stop at this red line, which is why if you look at the slide sorter, you can see this is essentially what it looks like in present mode. So that way, that's how you can use the edges of your slide to help you and to work to your benefit. You can let things trail off the side to create different shapes. You can have things half appear on the side to make it as if it's having motion or that it goes beyond just this flat thing. Like for instance, if you wanted to put clouds in here, you could do something like shape. And then this is the cloud. Now, if you just put the cloud here, it's like, okay, that's a cloud. It's in my sky. But if you wanted to create that sense of the setting being beyond just and going beyond sort of the four walls, you can take one of these and you can put it off to the side. So then that way, when you go into present mode and you look at it, you'll actually see, I don't see the full cloud because visually, like, I know that the sky goes beyond what's directly in front of me. And again, you can see how it goes off the side. The blue, I didn't go all the way up. That's why I see a little bit of white. And that's why present mode is good. And that's also why, that's also why looking over here in your slide sorter is good to sort of see what you see, what's being cut off. And again, if you want to see things and you can't quite get off the side, that's when you change your zoom to go from fit to like 50%. And that allows you to then work sort of in this space off the edge of the side or outside the box to create things that look different. So this was like my blue box, right? So I want to make that blue box a little bit bigger to ensure that I'm going outside the edge so I don't see that like white border around it. And that's just some basics about creating setting. We also talked about this, which was when we think about lining things up, how you have these blue lines and those blue brackets are talking about distance between the objects being equal. And then the red lines meaning everything's centered on each other. So it was another thing that we talked about in terms of making things look good. Now, you don't have to. If it's a comic book, you can be flexible. You know, the rules are a little bit different in something like a comic book or a graphic novel, but you can use these elements, these tools, those little brackets to sort of say, okay, now I know everything is spaced out properly. I know everything is balanced, or I know everything looks good. You know, I want to make sure everything's centered. Okay, there it goes. Like, it allows you to fine tune and adjust. These are the waves that we made where we just did like a scribble and I just copied it and pasted it and kind of moved it down. Oops, moved it down to make it look like, you know, the waves are going. The other thing we talked about last week was when you have different objects, you know, like let's say it's this and this, and you want them to always be together for whatever reason, you could click on one, then hold down shift and click on the other. It's going to select both of them. Arrange, group. This now means these are not two independent objects. These are now one object that will move together as one. And if you resize them, they resize together. So grouping is important. The other thing we talked about, which is really important, and then we'll move on to some next stuff as long as there's no questions, is about how when you put objects in, you're layering them. So I'll change this. So everything on the page is layered. So as you can see, this blue one goes beyond that gray one. Now, if I change this to like orange, let's say, and I bring this behind these, I know they're going to be behind because the levels that things exist at is based on when you added them to the slide. I knew that that orange was going to be behind everything else because I know that that was the first thing I added. So no matter what I did, I know that that's going to end up way in the back because it's the first thing. You're essentially building slides in stacks when you're working with these shapes. Now, if I wanted to change it, where let's say I wanted the blue to go behind the gray, I would click on it, arrange, order. Now, if I send it to back, the blue is going to go all the way back behind the orange because that's sending it to the first layer. But I can also just bring it to front or send backward. What that does is it only sends it behind the one additional layer. Now, if I were to put in a triangle, what you have to remember is that if I then put in, let's say this guy, and I put this guy here, and I make this guy red, but if I want to send this guy backwards, send backwards, it looks like nothing happened. But that's because this triangle was the most recently added thing. So by sending it backward, I actually put it behind the triangle. It doesn't put it behind the object it's physically touching or near. It's all about the order in which you added them to your slide. So if I wanted this one to kind of be behind the blue, I would have to do backward a couple of times to then start seeing the level at which it was added. And then obviously if I just did order, send it back, then it puts it way in the back. But that's just something to be aware of, is that when you're doing this arrange and you're sort of layering objects, that the send backward or bring forward is based on the order with which things were added to the slide. Cool. Any questions about any of that? And I know we spent a little bit of time working on your characters in your comics last week. So now what I want to do is, let's take like 10 minutes. So it's 3:27. Let's just round up. We'll say at 3:40. Let's share, spend like the next, 12, 13 minutes, work on that character that you made in Google Drawing, work on that setting. Because I know some of you had, you're working on the beach and stuff. And even if you leave that and want to like make improvements, you could click on the slide, and if you control click on a slide, you get a little menu and you can like duplicate the slide. So if you wanted to have like your first version, you could copy or duplicate the slide and then make adjustments to the second one if you want to sort of see how you improve on your work. So let's do that. And we'll just stay on the call, just work, and then, unmute, shout out if you have questions, if you want to see something, but spend a little time fine tuning the character as well as the setting and how the character's interacting with the setting based on things like arranging objects to be forward or behind, adding speech bubbles, And remember, every shape is a text box. You just, when you put it in, you just got to start typing. Cool. Let's go for it. So you got 12 minutes.
Where is duplicate slide again? Which tab is that?
So if you control click on the slide, you get a little menu that pops up. And in that menu is duplicate. You could theoretically also just click it so it's highlighted in yellow and do Command C to copy and then Command V to paste. And you're basically copying and pasting the slide. Did you get it, Donna?
I still don't see. No, I still don't see duplicate slide.
So I'll show you real quick.
Click.
Yeah, so like if
Is my
I,
edit-
so control click, so if I just control click, I held down the control, oh, you're on a Mac, Donna?
Yeah.
So I held down the control button and I clicked on the slide and I get this menu. You see duplicate slide right here.
Yeah.
Now, in theory, you could also just click on a slide, get it highlighted in yellow, do Command C to copy, and then Command V to paste, and it will paste it. Copying and pasting the slide is the same thing as duplicating a slide. I just like to point out that if you control click on it, that there's actually an option right there. But you might want to do that because you might say like, oh, this is what I worked on last week. Let me duplicate it or copy and paste it. So that way you can make adjustments, sort of seeing where your head was at a week ago, and then making adjustments based on, you know, new experience, new knowledge, whatever it may be.
Chris, is there any like line, like I'm trying to draw a nose. Is there any line like you can just sort of free draw or?
Yeah, so there's a few lines actually. So I'll share and I'll show you. So the line tool is here under arrange. It looks like this. And obviously, let me get to a clean slide and I'll show you. So if you just click the word line, then it's just going to draw you a line. And with this line, you could, you know, change the thickness. You could change the color. You can do whatever. It's just a straight up line. This little drop down triangle right here will give you options. So it's like an arrow. One thing is you could do Scribble. So you can literally just, you know, scribble. And then with this, you can still change the thickness and you can still change, you know, the color. A lot of times with a nose, I'll actually use a curve. And what that is when you click once, it'll start it. You click and hold and drag out. And then when you let go, it basically, that's where you're starting the turn. So you do something like this. And then if you click, it'll let you then keep going with the turn. It doesn't stop with the turn until you double click. So every time I'm changing the bend, I'm just clicking once to basically drop like an end point. And I realize this is not a nose. I'm just sort of showing you now. If I wanted to finish it, I would just double click. And then that's my curved line. So you do, and again, you click on it, it's still an object, so you can still rotate it and adjust it. You can still change the thickness. You can still change the color. Yeah, you can do all that stuff. You can change the, I mean, that's got a black, you know, the black line with the fill color on the inside of that shape. You know, you can change this to be that, then it's all yellow. Cool. It's just in this little drop down right here. about 5 minutes, and then we'll share some of the updates and enhancements to our characters and our settings.
Chris, how do I take my drawing and put it into the comic again? I know you showed us last week.
Yeah, no, that's
think you
fine.
did.
Yeah, I did, but that's cool. This is why we're doing this. What you do is and I'll share my screen. In Google Drawing, easiest way to do it is to click and hold on the outside of it and kind of drag across it. And what that'll do is that'll select all of the objects together, and then you go arrange group. Now I did that yesterday or last week, which is why it's not there, which is why it's shaded. Once you've grouped it all, it's essentially one object, then you can just copy it. So like if you're on a Mac, Command C, if you're on a Chromebook, it could be Control C. And then you come over here and just Command V, and it'll paste it in, assuming your internet is in better shape than mine. There it goes. Okay. And then it's huge, but then you can resize it and stuff like that. Because that's what we want. Like we want to be able to have it be big, and we want to be able to know that we're customizing it in Google Drawing kind of clean and neat. And then we're just taking just that one object after we group all the pieces together and bring it in here, because then we can just keep copying and pasting it. Now this guy here, I can just keep copying and pasting him from here onto all my other slides and just adding my speech bubbles, changing my settings and my backgrounds and things like that.
Got you. Thank you.
No problem. One more minute. All right. So, and I know that wasn't a ton of time, but I just wanted you guys to dabble and just tweak a little bit. So we'll go around my screen, which is puts Kara rather at the top. So why don't you share and just give us a little update on your refinements or fine tuning?
I'm trying to get my character into the comic, but let me share. Just remind me, with Zoom, it's desktop or application?
Do desktop. It's sometimes it's easier with desktop because some devices don't like, if you go to present mode, it won't actually show you everything.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So
There
I
we
was
go.
trying to do some of the and I'm trying to get my little beginning character, which is where here.
Yep.
Over to the screen, over to
Cool.
the comic page.
So now, it looks like you selected the whole thing and you went to arrange and group, right? It looks like you made this into one piece. Yeah, so go to group. So now everything is one. So now you're on a PC, is that right? Or is that a
Chrome.
Chromebook? So now, so copy would be Control C. And then you can come back here and paste Control V. And it drops your guy in, and then you can resize your guy or girl, whatever your character, and change the orientation of it. This would be, the character kind of, the eyes look like they're kind of going down to the right. This would be where like you could take one of the middle boxes and put it through itself to make the eyes look like they're going the other direction. And this is cool. And I wouldn't even do not just the eye, I would do the whole character. So if you just click on the whole character
Like
and
that?
then take one of the middle boxes of the character, like in the blue, those middle blue boxes, you see how the characters has the blue boxes. Yeah, you take one of those, click and hold and drag it through itself. You'll see the orientation of the eyes change. That's cool. Yeah. No,
Okay. I don't know. Should I?
it's all good. Amanda, why don't you share? Let's see some updates.
All right, hold on. Yeah, I got very perfectionist-y with my pupils. So it took a while to insert pupils appropriately. I mean, last week I just really had a head, a neck, and a triangle that was facing the wrong way. But I still want to remind me again, I want to take this hand and transfer it to the other arm.
Mhm.
So how
So
do I
what
do this?
Yep. So you can do that.
Oops,
And then
that's
when
it.
you do that, now that's going to select, hold on, don't do that because that's now going to take the whole hand out of the way, right? So just do
Oops, I did.
your undo.
What
Yeah.
just happened?
So what you would
Undo
do,
again.
you're good. So what you would do in this situation is, because you want to click and drag to select a whole bunch of things, right? But you don't want to click and drag to select the arm. So instead of, in this case, going from like the top down, I would go from the bottom up, and you go slowly so that you're just highlighting just the fingers. So if you go for like from right there, like click and hold, well, that's moving it. You always want to start.
Hold on.
It's okay. Just undo. You always start in the blank space. So click and hold.
Oh, okay.
Like there, like from the, yeah, there, click and hold, and now go up a little bit. Nope, down a little bit. There you go.
Oh,
See,
perfect. Okay.
now what you could do is go to arrange and go to group. Now what that's done is it's made those 5 fingers into one thing and not 5 individual ones. And now you can copy that and then paste it and bring it over to the other side. Yep, there you go. And then you
can I drag it?
Yep, totally. And then you can line it up and there's your other hand. And they look the same.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's great. And one thing, and this is a good example, one of the reasons why I have teachers go through this sort of practice is to see, like, you can get super detail oriented, but also you'll notice like people will gravitate to different things, right? Some people will gravitate more towards like the finite detail in the character. Others will spend more on the setting. Similarly, when you're doing this with students, we always have the same thing, right? Some students will get super detail oriented on building their characters. Some will focus more on the story. Some will focus more on the setting. So it's good practice to kind of see what does go into this, so that if you were thinking about doing this in your classroom, like we first did it with third graders, where it was like they were making hair like yours, and it took forever. We never got to the actual book. So the next year we sort of told them how to do it and said, that's homework. You're not allowed to do it in school, because we knew they would spend a ton of time on it, but it was like, that can't be class. Like classwork, we got to focus on the story, you know? So like, this is good to get you a sense of, you know, what's possible. Now, what I'll do is I'm actually going to show you, you reminded me of something. I'm going to stop your share for a second. I'm going to show you a little trick about doing something like a hand, because hands are a pain in the butt because they're hands, right? They're really hard to make look good. Even regular, you know, like in drawing, painting, they're really hard. Little trick I found with doing a hand is you do something like this. Is you just take, let's say this, right? And then take some lines. Now it looks a little bit more like a paw, right? But it's a little bit more cartoony, like a, you know, the Simpsons have 4 fingers type vibe. But you do something like that, and then this could be your hand. So it's not perfect, but it's a way to then again, you're layering those objects to create something different. And then you would obviously need to have an arm coming out of it. But essentially just a matter of putting lines on top of something else that looks similar to, say, the back of a hand, and almost thinking of it almost like when you're looking at like a hand like this, like it was a fist, you kind of see the whole object, and you kind of see the lines in between the fingers. So just a little trick. All right, Donna, you're next up.
I kind of got stuck on the hair too. And I tried the squiggle lines, and then and then I went to that. So I was trying to fix that shape to be hair. But
That's
that's
awesome.
where I am.
No,
Is
no
there any way
problem.
to shrink this and stretch this and make this into more
Yeah.
hair?
So what you could do
I'm
is,
trying. I can't.
no, this is fine. So like click on that hair object, right? So when you click on it, you have all the boxes that you can change and adjust. What I would say is like, what you do is copy and paste this object. And when you copy it and paste it, make the second version a little bit smaller and turn it a little bit of a different way. So that way you then start having, you know, you rotate it just a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. So then what's going to happen is, and then use the circle that comes out of the box to rotate down to your right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then if you start layering objects like that, it'll start giving it texture. And then on
Like
top
you
of
mean
it,
put it over here?
put it over on, yeah, things like that.
Oh,
Or
look at that.
even on top of itself, or so you almost would see like the waves. So even if it had like the little thin black line around it, it would almost be like the waves of hair, right? Like if it was curly hair. And that's what you can do. You can kind of layer these objects. And if you get really into it and you're doing it, and let's say you were even doing it from an art perspective, unless it was a story, you say, all right, you realize how the hair is going to go, build your hair separate off to the side, get the hair looking great, select it all and group it so it becomes one object, and then drop it onto the head. But that's how you can kind of layer these objects.
Yeah. Okay. That's a little better.
But I like it. And again, this is
I'm
about
trying.
you guys sort of seeing that if this is something you might want to do, about like how intensive this can be, but it's also good in the sense of you're focusing on character traits. So if you're going to end up doing a comic book and they're building their own character, they're really starting to think about, what does my character look like and why? Why does my character have these features and why? And things like that, which could be great, you know. And if you want to focus more on the story, you might have set limitations on the character in terms of, you know, you have 2 hours to do it and we're hitting the buzzer, then that's it, you're moving on, because maybe you want them to focus more on the story, you know, or probably write the story first, think about the character in their heads, and then design the character, at least when they're midway through the story. But I like it. Yeah, it's just about layering the objects. Sarah, what have you got?
All right, let me just share. So this is my sketchbook cartoon die,
That's awesome.
and then I just pasted it into my background from before.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's a great character. And then that's the thing is you can just keep reusing that character, resize them, stuff like that, and move them to different places. Nice.
Yeah, it was.
Awesome.
I got into it. It was fun.
Yeah. And again, that's what the sort of decide where this would fit with the students in terms of like where's the focus going to be and whatnot. And then I'll once we go through everyone's with this, we'll talk about sort of the other way to do this without characters. But still have a graphic novel vibe to it. If you thought that the rabbit hole of making the character might be too deep a hole to climb into, which it can be. We definitely, lost time on characters some years, but the kids had fun. They learned, so it's all good.
Yeah, and it's a great like kind of intro into graphic design, for character design. So very cool.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's also, good for just the understanding of how different components on a screen interact with each other. And it's, that layering sense and about how you can adjust and tweak, and you're not forced just to stick a bullet point where it says add a bullet point, that you can be more creative, and these things are malleable. You just have to know how to work with them.
Yeah, and one obstacle that is, I have in the art classroom with my 7th graders is a lot of them are interested in doing, using Photoshop, but that's not really something that I can get for them right now, or run it as a full class. So this could be a cool way of doing a little bit of here's like what a layer is, or let's start here, and then maybe 1 or 2 of you could use Photoshop. So I think this is a great way to kind of bring in some graphic design and Photoshop into the classroom without necessarily having to teach 25 kids how to use it all.
Yeah, about how the elements interact with each other, and about the layers. I mean, Photoshop is, and everyone wants to learn Photoshop, but Photoshop is such a deep tool that it's gonna be overwhelming, and everyone wants to do it to change the look of pictures, but it's like you can change the look of pictures subtly in other ways and actually have it look good. It doesn't have to be the crazy pro end design program.
Totally.
And we'll do a little bit of that in the next thing, because the next thing is a little bit more messing with photos. Very cool. Lisa, what do you got?
Wait a minute. I have to follow Sarah.
Sure. What it's just how it showed up on my how it showed up.
I'm
on
an
my
art
screen.
teacher.
Yeah. All right. Hold on. So I also, the hair was kind of tricky. I just cut my beach scene and then I put my person in. And yeah, I thought I was having trouble with the hair color. Trying to do blonde. I don't know. It wasn't really working.
Yeah, hair is one of those things, and this is sort of this out of the box notion behind it is sometimes like we think of hair as sort of stringy, right? In the sense of like use lines because it makes the most sense. But then it gets tough because you're like, wow, but my hair is actually like thicker than that and it doesn't look the same. Now, right, says the bald guy, who hasn't had hair in 15 years. And that's what's important about this is like starting to think about like, okay, like we're using slides in a different way. Like I want to design a character being a comic book in slides. Okay. But maybe I got to think about hair differently, because if it's not being what I want. So now I'll show you a trick based on that. And the trick is this. Let me share. The trick is if I want hair on my person, my character, I am going to put in a cloud. And I'm going to put in the cloud, and I'm going to make the cloud blonde. And then I'm going to send the cloud to the back. Now the cloud's in the back, right? That's the start of my hair. Now I'm going to make my hair a little bit bigger, but now it's weird, right? Because I have hair, but it's not on my forehead and it's really bizarre. No problem. I'm just going to take another cloud. I'm going to make this cloud smaller, kind of go into what I was showing with Donna, and I'm going to put this into here. Now, looks weird, like it's just sort of stuck on there, because it is stuck on there. But now I'm going to take this and I'm going to make the line of it transparent. So now this hair looks like, and I can adjust it and tweak it. So now this hair looks like it actually comes over the forehead. You know, I could extend it out a little bit this way, and it gives it, it looks like the hair is actually on the person's head. Now, similar to what you were doing, Don, is I could copy and paste this again. I'm going to rotate this a little bit, make this particular one a little smaller, but put it over here and adjust it. And now it looks like the hair is actually coming down the side and that it's not just like bangs, right? Like, so you could then do this same thing over here on this side. I'll rotate it and stick it like right there. And now it gives it a little bit more of a real feel. So that's just sort of a little trick that you can do with hair. Because
that's awesome. I like that.
Yeah, because these things are tricky. And that's why, like, I didn't want to give you a whole ton of stuff up front. I wanted you guys to kind of like see like where the limitations are, because that's really what this course is about too, is about like going beyond what is sort of the expected or known limitation of this platform. Ms. Lloyd, you are next up on the screen.
Okay, let's see here. I'm sorry, I apologize to everyone. I had Wi-Fi problems, so I got here a little bit late, but I tried to play with the squiggly lines and things. I don't know if you can
Yeah.
see it.
That's awesome.
I have had such a hard time making curved lines. You have no idea. I've tried doing this in the past and I always end up just throwing it out because I can't. So I didn't know about that double click thing and one click to curve. So I'm very proud of that mouth.
There you go. It looks good.
But yeah, it's just exploring all of it.
No, definitely.
And the gradient, which I got last week, I think somebody did theirs in gradient, and I'm like, oh, I like that. It gives it depth. So
it does. No, that's awesome, and I dig it. And that's the thing, is like you can kind of sort of see like where your stumbles are, where if you were to introduce this to students, these are like the same similar pitfalls that students will have. So by going through this for yourself and making your own, like this becomes the demo for students, and you can kind of walk them through how, like, listen, I struggle with the curved line, but I figured it out. Like, here's how you do it. You know, I struggle with hair, but here's a trick. And that's why it's good to go through this, because it's one thing to build a comic book and have like the backgrounds and all that in slides, but you know, the characters are integral to the stories. Like you need to be able to develop those and design those sort of separate and alone to focus on that look. And they look solid. Nice work.
Thanks.
Miss Marty, how about you? Last one to go.
All right. I did mine similar to yours, but I did change some of my, excuse my messy desktop. I added some things to my scene.
Nice.
I did like the clouds off the sides, like you suggested.
Mm-hmm.
I added on to my house that is now an ice cream shop, and I put
Nice.
this ice cream together. That's all I got.
No, and that's great. And that's good, because that's a good example too of like why we don't do the cone in Google Drawing, because like you're not going to necessarily want the cone on every page. But once you understand how these shapes work and interact with each other, you don't need to make every object in Google Drawing. It's like you build your character there, but then once you do, you're like, oh, I'm in slides. I need to make an ice cream cone real quick. I can do that real quick in Google Slides because I understand how these objects and these shapes work with each other. And it's awesome.
Right.
Fantastic. Nicely done, folks. Any questions in general after having seen things? Anything come up before we sort of look at the next level of the similar vein, but we're going to go a little bit less character driven, but still comic book graphic novel vibe. Any thoughts, questions after having seen everybody's stuff? All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to still work in the same presentation, but we're going to think more in terms, less in terms of like that sort of picture book kind of comic graphic novel, and think more of like a traditional panel based graphic novel. What we're also going to do is in this switch gears out of creating a character and more using real images, because you can do things like kids can take pictures of themselves and they can become characters in this graphic novel. So the way you do that is like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you guys do the same thing in a minute. I'm going to create a new one. And the reason I'm going to create a new one is because I'm going to think about this a little bit differently. So for instance, this is more of sort of like that elementary school, like picture book style comic, or just in general, early reader style piece of literature. It's not necessarily what you think of automatically when you think of like a traditional comic book or graphic novel. So what we're going to do over here, STI. So we're going to do this. We're going to call this one graphic novel. I'll give you guys time to create one of these in a minute. I want to have this look like a real piece of paper. I want this to look like an actual graphic novel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Page Setup, and instead of widescreen, I'm going to do Custom, and I'm going to do 8.5 by 11. So now it's set up more like a traditional piece of paper. 8.5 by 11 is your standard piece of paper. What I generally like to do is I like to leave this alone temporarily. I'll just hit the plus button and I get this new slide. Now this has this title box and this text box, and I'll leave those there because I use those kind of as margins. If I don't want to go straight up to the edge of the page of my book, like if I'm visualizing like a traditional or a more traditional like comic book, I don't necessarily, maybe I do want to bleed right to the edge, and then I'll show you how you can do that. I like to leave these as margins. And then what I do is I start layering objects. So the first thing I layer are my panels. That's my first panel. Let's say that's my second panel. And maybe I make this a little bit bigger, and I make this guy a little bit bigger. And then let's say I do my third panel down here. Right, so now we're starting to look a little bit more like a traditional panel-based graphic novel or a panel-based comic book or even cartoon. I'm not going to do any writing in any of these, but I'm going to start thinking about adding regular textual elements, right? Like there's always that sort of narration box, that kind of voiceover box, that descriptor box that's just like the next day, you know, and usually in a graphic novel, it'll be a little white box of text maybe at the top. So I just add another one, you know, and say like, once upon a time. So now I have that. So now I can start making it, starting to kind of look like, and again, I line that stuff up with those red lines. So now I want to get a picture, right? So I want to put a picture in there that's going to be what's happening once upon a time. So I'm going to insert. Now, if I wanted to, I can search the web and I can say, assuming it loads with our stellar Wi-Fi these days, and let's say, and I like this one. I'm going to put this one in. It's going to take a minute, but while it's loading, I say, this is massive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up, and I'm using those red lines to get myself in the right spot. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make it smaller. Now, it doesn't exactly fit. No problem. If I were to take this though, it's going to stretch it out and it may look okay or it may not. Alternately, what I can do is this. I have this massive picture. If I double click on this picture, I get these black lines. I can crop this picture. Oops, not that way. I can crop this by grabbing these black parts right here. Now, I'm bringing this up. That red line is now telling me I'm lined up with the bottom of that first panel. Oh no, I went too far on that one. But I can see, and I can see that I could drop it down. There's that panel. See, the blue is telling me it's the right height. Oh, that red line was telling me I was centered on the page. So this blue is telling me I'm at the right height. I could then take this one and I could bring it this way. And then I have blue bracket at the bottom. It's a little tough to see, but now I know that I'm lined up with the side of that. And then I press return. And now I've cropped that photo. I haven't stretched or squished it. I've cropped it to fit that panel. And we know from a minute ago about arrange, order, send backward. So now I have my first panel of my graphic novel. I can then come over here. And let's say I put another little thing. There was a guy. The reason I'm doing this is showing you that you can then have, if you wanted to, you could have students do something like use the camera. If you didn't want them to, let's say, build a character themselves, let's say you wanted them to actually just do something based on them, like them, you can theoretically have them take a picture and then insert that picture. Put that in there. Now, obviously, it's going to look a little bit weird, a little bit different because the background may not be what you want, but it's a way you can start manipulating that where if you wanted the students to put themselves into a setting or put themselves into a story, a narrative, you can do that. And then this is where what you would do is, and you can do the same thing where if you wanted to, you could crop this. Let's say I bring this in and I want to see just my head. Not that anyone wants to see just my head. But by doing this, it makes the physical picture smaller, and then I can actually drag this out and it changes the layout. And if I wanted to, I can then drop this here, arrange, order, send backward. And then if I felt like it, I could now insert a thought bubble. And this empty space up here is actually fine because we're putting in a thought bubble. I'm going to take the little diamond and drag it down here and say, let's make this a different color. Let's make this and say, you know, like that. Like that. So this is a way where you could actually start doing something panel based, like a traditional comic book or graphic novel, but using real images. So they're not having to create, you know, characters or things like that, or they're not having to create backgrounds. You can actually then start manipulating real images, but using things like the layering of the objects, using things like callouts and shapes to create those sort of text elements of those sort of narration boxes, different than dialogue boxes and things of that nature. Cool.
The cropping piece, can you just went really fast for me. Can you show us how to crop something again?
Totally. Yeah. No problem. So I'm going to grab, and we'll do it without all the other stuff. We'll just do this. So if I insert an image, and let's say it's find one where there's easiest. Okay, this one. And I'm going to do this one just because there's different elements in it. There's like the red flowers and stuff. So I'm looking at the whole picture here. It's this whole picture. It's an object. So it's in this blue box, like everything, right? If I double click on this picture, I then get this black sort of inside the blue. Now they're not squares to change the size. Now they're brackets. There's like little black brackets, or in the middle, there's just little black lines. If I put my mouse over the bracket, I get this little arrow. I press and hold, I can bring this in. Now, if I bring this all the way in, let's say just to the house, you can see that the picture is still there, right? But this particular set of flowers is now in the shadows, because what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm going to crop it. Now, real cropping is like cutting out the extra stuff. This is more like masking it, because it's still going to be there. We're just hiding it. And then I could bring this down. So if I wanted just this house without any of the background, what I'm doing is I'm just bringing in those, the sort of the crop inner black lines. Once I have the image that I want, I just press return. And now I see just that. I don't see the mountains. I don't see that other set of flowers. Now, if I double click on the picture again, it's going to show me what the actual picture is. And it's going to show me what I've cropped. I can also, now that I have this little like 4-way little grabber thing right in the middle, I can pick this up, press and hold, and I can actually move the picture around inside of that crop window. So if I knew I wanted it to be that size, I can do that. Press return. Now I'm looking at those flowers in that part of the house. Again, double click, I can just change. I say I don't want the house at all. I just want the flowers. All right, no problem. Press return. And then what's nice about this is, like, if the picture was a rectangle, sort of a horizontal, landscape image, I want it to be more vertical and more portrait style. I can come over here and say, look at that. I just took a picture that was a landscape oriented photo, double clicked on it and cropped it to be a portrait size photo. And I got rid of the extra stuff that I didn't want. It's still there if I need it, but now I have essentially a brand new photo. Did that make more sense, Amanda? Yeah, the cropping is really a super useful tool, because when you have the photo where you're like, it looks really good, but it doesn't quite fit, it's not the right size, just crop out the junk on the edges you don't need, and it'll let you then resize the photo in a different shape. Now, I'll show you one other thing super cool, which nobody seems to ever know about, is you can actually put photos in shapes too. So alternately, I can come over here and let's say insert an image. And let's say let's just do a different one here. Let's take this one, like the Forrest Gump road. So I have this picture, the highway in Utah or wherever it is, and it's a picture, right? It's a square, rectangle, whatever. What you could also do is you can actually make it into a shape. So right here, this is the crop tool, right? So like if I press that, it's the same thing as double clicking on the image. I get those black lines and I can crop it. But the super handy little drop down arrow next to it, this little drop down arrow, I can take this and I can make it into a circle. I click on the picture, I can use this drop down and I can make it into an arrow. So you can have fun playing around with those by not just cropping it or masking it, but you can actually put it inside of a heart. And that gives you some flexibility to be more creative and be more visual with those images. Cool. All right, so now here's what you guys are going to do, and we'll give you time to do it. You're going to make a new slideshow in that same folder, and you're going to call that slideshow, STI 5591 graphic novel. So go ahead and do that now, and then I'll tell you we'll talk through the next steps. And once you have the file in that folder, a new Google slideshow, STI 5591 graphic novel, you're going to change the page orientation by going to File, Page Setup, and you'll choose Custom from the little drop down, and you'll make it 8.5 by 11. And what that's going to do is that's going to make it not look like a Google slide anymore. It'll actually make it look like a piece of paper. And yes, I know that graphic novels are not printed on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, but for the purposes of a student wanted it printed out at the end, most likely we're going to print on 8.5 by 11. But obviously you could tweak it to any size you wanted.
Chris, I'm having a hard time with when I tried to make a new Google slide, and then I just tried to make a copy of the other one I made, but then I'm getting this like it's like a sad file face.
Sad file face. We don't want sad file faces. Yeah, so that happened to.
Can I show you?
Yeah, totally. Share your screen. That happened to somebody else today. They were having Google issues.
Before, when I was kind of playing around with it, when we were making our characters, I was getting the sad file. I don't know. It's not
I think
good.
Google might be having some trouble today because I did. A colleague sent me a frantic email saying, you know, it. Yeah, and I'm looking at. So I think so. If you look to the far right of your browser, next to the L, it says update. I have a feeling that so whenever Google Chrome asks to update, you want to update because usually there's something that breaks inside of it. So I have a feeling that if you update your browser and just click the update button, it'll reset and it'll probably fix whatever the problem is.
Oh, okay. Because if I made a copy, I tried making a copy of the slide, and then it like the copy shows up.
Right,
but then
yeah. And what you can do is if you don't even need to make a copy, like you can just right now go to new Google Slides, make a whole new slideshow, and then change the orientation of the page layout. That way you'll have one that sort of just looks like a Google slide, but we made it like a comic book. This one, we're making it look like a piece of paper. So yeah,
right.
New Google
That's what
Slides.
I tried to do originally, and it wasn't working. So let me see. And I got like the same sad file face.
Yeah, so I would update the browser, and then
Okay.
We'll see what happens. And then I'll catch you back up. But so does everyone else have their new graphic novel slideshow and everyone oriented it 8.5 by 11? Cool. So now, like I did, we're going to leave that first title slide alone for the time being. You're going to press the plus button so you get one of those title and text slides. And again, we're going to use the title and text boxes as margins, kind of, to basically ensure that if we were to print it and bind it, let's say, the white area to the left of that shape would pretty much be where like the binding would go, if you were to like create like an actual shared book. Then what I want you guys to do, and I'm going to share my screen real quick, is I want you on the second slide, you don't need to make 3 and 4, but on this second slide, I want you to make either 3 or 4 panels. It's up to you. I made 3. I could have just as easily, brought this one over here and made a smaller panel and then copy and pasted it. Right. I want you to decide either 3 panels or 4 panels. I want you to create a little simple story in this. So I had once upon a time an image, there was a guy, you could have had a giraffe and put a picture of a giraffe in. I would have to then finish the story here. Like there was a guy with bad Wi-Fi who was on Zoom, you might have a logo of Zoom, something like that. But basically I want you to create a single page, 3 or 4 panel graphic novel story with images, those sort of dialogue, or not dialogue, but like narration type boxes, and then at least a speech bubble or 2 on your character. Cool. we'll say 15 minutes at least to start, you know, so it's 4:20. So by 4:35, we'll do a little share. That should give everyone some time to kind of make the panels and think of their story. And it does not have, I mean, it can literally be like mine where it was like, once upon a time there was a guy and he was on Zoom and he had bad Wi-Fi. I mean, that's fine. You know, don't overthink the story just for the purposes of the process. All right, go for it.
Can you just review when you made the panels, you used boxes, you used
Shapes.
shapes?
Yeah,
and
so
not the text box.
no. So I always use, and I'll do a blank one just so you can see. So I hate, so I never use a text box. I don't like text boxes because they're a pain in the butt. Number two, when I use the shapes, I do the shapes because then I can really customize and I have this visual of the shaded area to see what the size is. So this is helping me to gauge like how big do I want it in relation to, you know, whatever I'm going to do down here, because I'm not going beyond that box down there. So I like to do this because it helps you get a sense of my orientation. I also don't do a text box because if you put a text box in, you put the text box in, it's huge. Now we're not actually putting any text inside of this shape. This is just a frame. I'm not even going to use this to do my like dialogue stuff because then I type the text. I then have to shrink this down and I still have to come over here and make it and then I'm like, oh wait, there's no border on it. Now I got to come over to the border. In using a text box, you have to then add all these other things that a shape comes with. So if I do the shape, I could just say, I only want it to be this big. And I just start typing. And I still have to change this, but the border is already there. And I didn't have to make it smaller because I only made it how big I wanted. And I affected the same result because every shape is a text box. It's a filled in bordered text box, essentially. So I never work with text boxes. I always work with shapes just because it helps me better visually arrange things. Cool.
Can you go through, Chris, the updating worked? I was able to make a blank slide, the graphic novel. Then what was I supposed to do with changing the orientation?
File, page setup. And then when the box comes up, it'll say widescreen 16:9. You click on that and choose custom. And then do 8.5:11. And then you'll see that it changed the orientation. So now it doesn't look like a slide, it looks like a piece of paper. We're not doing anything with the title slide, just press that plus button. So you get slide number 2. Slide number 2 will have a click to add title and a click to add text box. You're not going to do anything with those. We're going to use those like margins. So you'll use shapes and you'll put either 3 or 4 panels, basically like giant rectangles or squares on there, but don't go above, below, right, or left of those text box margins.
Awesome, thank you.
And then you'll add your extra sort of white box for, you know, the kind of narration. You can add the call outs, you know, pictures. Cool.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And as always, just shout out if you have a question or an issue.
image, but now I want, I've cropped an image and now I want to expand it, but I don't know how to do that.
So
Without-
if you've cropped it and you still have the black bars on the inside, just press enter
Yep.
or return to basically
Ah,
keep the
perfect.
mask. Yeah, and then now you get the blue boxes. So now you can take the blue boxes and resize that now cropped or masked image.
got it. Awesome. That's what I needed. Thank you.
Chris, I'm trying to take a picture to insert and it keeps coming out like I'm in a fun house, very narrow. How come it's not looking normal when it comes up on Google?
And you'll share your screen, share your desktop, and let's walk through it and let's see what happens.
Right, I'm on 2 desktops. That might be
Yep.
a problem.
So it's curious, there could be a setting. Are you on what kind of device you're using?
I'm using a Mac, but I'm on 2 monitors. So maybe that's the problem because I'm taking the picture on one and I'm working on another.
Well, no, the camera's coming from the Mac,
Green
so you'd be looking at the green dot. So that shouldn't affect the
All right, well,
orientation of it.
I'll
Let's
try
see.
doing it. Insert, I'm going to insert.
Yeah, I'm seeing the other desktop. I'm not seeing the
Alright.
main. I see. Yeah, why don't you do then maybe the application window if you have the multiple screens running.
Yes, I have too many things happening. This is my life.
It's fine.
Can't-
Yeah, and sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes like these things just get funky when you're doing like when the
That
camera's
might
being.
be it. I've taken it a couple times and it's not coming out right. So I'm trying to, I got a picture of the school. I put that up. I
Yep.
made it big so it would sit in. And then I thought I'd put a picture of myself and what I'm thinking about at the beginning of the school year.
Definitely.
So I went into insert image.
So do this,
Insert.
share your screen though, share the application window.
Uh,
So when you go to share screen, share the application window that has your Google slideshow on it,
Okay.
and we'll take a look.
So then I go
Yep.
insert image camera. And there's the picture. So when I hit click, it should take the picture, right? So I think I just took it and then I go
Yeah, that's
insert.
weird.
Look how it
Insert it.
comes out.
Yeah, and you can even see it on the side in a little preview. It shows up
Very weird.
distorted.
Now,
That's weird. So
Yeah,
that could just be so what I would do is sort of the troubleshooting is it's fine for our purposes for right now.
Yeah.
But then what I would do is try, so is it like an iMac with a separate monitor or is it like a MacBook with a separate monitor?
It's a MacBook.
So what I would
With a
try
separate-
is like at when we're done, you unplug that second monitor and just try and see. So like when you're just operating sort of in its native environment, if it's still doing that, I would reboot, because even though you're not showing the update available in Chrome, there may be an update available. Sometimes that little update button doesn't always show up right away, even if you have one available. So if
Yeah.
you reboot, the update might get pushed out and then you'll see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me see if I can't crop it. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. We're going a couple more minutes. People seem to be chugging along. I'll do that in a minute, and then we'll share.
Chris, one last question. How do you turn a picture into a shape? Like if I want it to be a cloud?
So when you click on the picture and you have the blue boxes around it, if you look above on the toolbar, kind of by like arrange and help, there's the little cropper mask tool. There's a little
Yep,
drop down
yep.
arrow. Choose that
Yep,
drop
got
down
it.
arrow. You'll shape
Yep.
some whatever.
Cool. Got it. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, all right. Let's see what folks came up with in their too short period of independent work time. But it's okay because I'm the one who gave you the too short period of independent work time. But part of this is just seeing like what you can do, like where these where these kind of roadblocks are. So the part of the point of this is that as you're going through this and realizing that this takes a little bit longer, a little more for fine tuning, hopefully if you're thinking about using this in class with your own students, it gives you some perspective of how much time you may need to budget for these different elements or for these different activities inside of your own planning. And I'm sort of truncating it down, kind of rushing you on purpose, so you can kind of see like how this works in 5 minutes versus what if I gave you half an hour to do it? Sure, be a lot better, a lot bigger, whatever. So again, it's about like getting you a sense of how you might time this out in your own lesson planning or your own unit planning if you're to use something like this. So right now, Amanda, you're in the top left corner of the screen. So let's see what you got.
Okay. All right, hold on. Let me expand and share screen. And then I can do a presentation mode. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I ran into problems sizing the boxes. They're a little wonky, but
Totally. And like I said, I know that I rushed you on time on this, but like that's exactly the point, is like you did this and it's great. You're getting the vibe of it and like sort of the direction of where it's headed. And that's what's important. But you can see that like something that may seem so simple as just putting in a couple of pictures and some, you know, dialogue boxes becomes actually there's a lot more fine tuning to this process than, you know, just kind of slapping these things together. But that's great. And you can create these fun little stories, and these could be, especially, you know, as an English teacher, like you can do something like a challenge for the kids like this. Like you have 15 minutes, create a simple 3-panel story, like see what they come up with, to get a sense of, you know, where their literary mind is, you know, or like get a sense of the, and you say like no genre or whatever, you're just gonna do 3 panels. Do they go for something more fantasy? Do they go for something more real? Do they go for something, you know, more science fiction in terms of this quick story? It can give you a sense of like where their literary head is at. Well, that's awesome. Nice. Let's see who's next in the screen always reorients itself. Miss Wolfson. Let's see what you got.
I need more time.
Of course, no, I know that. Like I said, I know that I push you guys and I know that I do this, but like part of it is like on purpose so that you could see like the depth of time that you would need to give to students for a project like this.
I guess I'm one of those students that take a long time getting started.
And that,
Okay,
yeah, but let's see where
this
you're
is
at.
my go-to is this is my dog. These 2 pictures are real. This is from the internet. So watching TV, this is my dog. I'm actually watching, you could see, I think you could see CNN in the background there with
Nice.
all his toys, staring at me with his toys.
And that's great. And there's like that, and that's perfect. And like in the short time I gave you, like you have your 3 panels, you have that story. More time, you would fine tune it and, you know, sort of align the pictures to kind of fit and stuff. But you get the point of it. And that's really what this is about. It's about the process and sort of understanding what that final outcome could look like. And obviously, you know, with students, you could have them do a 5-page one. You know, we've done this with students where we say, listen, we're doing this massive book on whatever it may be. You're going to have 5 pages. You can't have less than 2 panels on a page, and you can't have more than 4. And we let them then kind of organize that story and those pages how they want, but we give them like 6 weeks to do it, you know, as part of a, you know, an ELA unit. So yes, 100%. I know that I'm you know, limiting you guys, but there's a purpose behind it. Miss Carrie, how about you?
All right. I just made a simple story about me. So I went to SHS, fun fact, and Spargo Middle School. I'm Quaker.
Oh, so the whole bit.
Yep. And then I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art, and now
That's awesome.
I teach 7th and 9th grade art at Edgemont. So I didn't make it very far away from home.
No, but that's cool. Like this is, you know, and you as the art teacher obviously went to like changing the fonts to look more comic and stuff like that. And you can eventually do that. Like you can have kids sort of add those elements. A lot of times what I'll do with students in terms of expectations is we'll say, choose like 1 font for dialogue and 1 font for those sort of narration boxes, you know, so that way you kind of separate the text visually. Sometimes we'll even do things like the narration box is white, but like your speech bubble should be gray. So that way, again, just like we can give them options like that, where you can have them think in terms of visual separation of different elements within the story. And then on the bottom, on that speech bubble, you have that little gold diamond at the bottom. You can click and hold and actually drag that over. And that's what's nice about those, is you could orient them to actually sort of fit whatever the space is. Awesome. Nicely done.
Thank you.
So we'll stop that. And then unfortunately, Miss Garrett, you have to go, Lisa, again, after the art teacher. Sorry.
I had a feeling this is going to happen. And again, it's going to be a little embarrassing for me.
It's all good. We're all friends here.
In my defense, I had a little bit of a technical issue.
It's fine. It's all good.
No, mine's terrible.
No,
I
it's
did a
not terrible
little-
at all. Yeah,
I went to the beach this weekend, so I did a little beach
perfect.
thing, a little.
Yeah.
And I was gonna try to add little objects into, like, I feel like I wasn't sure about having the objects don't fill the whole box. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So I wasn't sure what I should have done there instead.
No, and that's fine. And we'll talk about that in a minute, sort of as we wrap up, that this is like a totally fine entry point to it. And this is the thing. I don't necessarily want to put too many limitations on you. It's like, see where you have these pitfalls. And that's one of them, right? One of them is, this is not designed to be a graphic novel creation tool. We're sort of hacking this, or thinking outside like the framework of what Google Slides is. But it's going to then make us think about, when we put something in, we're going to notice things more glaring. So how do we fix that? This is perfect for a first attempt. No problem with it. And then once we get through everyone sharing, I'll show you some little tricks about how you could fill that box or that panel, or how you could then think about other things to tweak that or to use that space. Because then a lot of this too is going to go back to like the notion of the kids. This is where you could also start drafting, right? That you could do this as a first draft, and then the kids say, you know, I don't like this and I don't like that. You say, okay, keep this slideshow, use it as draft number 1. Maybe you need to go take a picture of a beach bag filled with stuff. But now you're not just gonna be like, I want a picture of a beach bag. You're very literally going to say, oh, I want it to be in this panel and I want it to look like this. So let me go set the stage. Like, let me go and actually set up like a photo shoot essentially. And they'll know, and they'll have a sense of where it actually goes. And they can even duplicate the slideshow and then just swap out from the picture that wasn't perfect to the picture that they actually took that would fit in there. So yeah, for a first attempt at just a couple of minutes, that's exactly what I wanted you to have. And again, part of this is I want you guys to see where there's limitations. I want you to see where stuff doesn't work naturally, or I want you to see where, like, I wish it did this. It's like, great, because we can do that, but I need you to see those issues before we can solve them. But nice work. Ms. Lloyd, let's see what you got. Nice.
I played around. I got a picture of our school and I put that. It took a little bit. I had to import it into Google Slides and then change it to a PNG, but I got that in. And then I took a picture of myself, which didn't come out good, but I just stretched it out so it looked more normal. And then I added the speech bubble. And then I was running out of time. So I quickly went on and found some other slides and just, you know, put like what they might have done this summer. So sort of as a, I don't know, just an example of how to begin the school year, what we're thinking about.
No, definitely. And this is also a good example too of like using those title and text boxes sort of as margins, because you can see that like on your top panel, like you have that speech bubble is kind of going out of that margin. And visually what it starts to do is it starts to make the page feel unbalanced, because you have that sort of margin on that right side. And it's one of those things where sometimes when you're in slides and you have all that sort of white grayish space around the slide, you don't necessarily think visually about like what that it's there. It becomes sort of lost. But when you actually see it like in present mode, this is how it print out. So this is where you start to notice like, oh, that I have a nice little margin on the side in case the printer screws up. But like on the left side, it's a little unbalanced, and I might lose some of that like in the printing or in a binding situation if you want to like bind this. So that's why it's good to think about those. And then it's also
a white, this here is a white shape because the slide actually went off the side and it looked really weird. So I was looking at that thinking, how can I make this look more like it's fitting on the page? But
right.
Running out of time.
and that's fine. And again, this is why like in a real instructional setting, you would give students way more than like 15 minutes to work on something like this, but it gives you a sense of what goes into this. And then like you went, which is fine, you went with all of your panels touching, which is definitely a stylistic thing. And there's fine. You will see a lot of comic books that do that. I'm somebody who visually, I always like that separation. So that would be something you would talk to the students about like the style of the design. Are all your panels going to touch, or are you going to have those little bits of separation between the panels to kind of have that negative space to help set the elements apart from one another? And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's very much a stylistic choice, but that's cool because then like the kids get to sit there and think about like, oh, it's not just about the writing of the story. I'm going to make a very purposeful visual choice about how I want my book to look. Nice work, Miss Marty.
I was muted.
Yes.
I was saying that I didn't get very far.
Fine.
Like finding the pictures and getting them aligned with the boxes. I
Mhm.
became like OCD. And then like getting the text boxes to you see like this one is like hanging over and I
Mhm.
couldn't fix it. I can't.
So
I don't
just
know,
delete
they
that.
made-
Just delete that. It's an empty text box. You don't need it.
Okay, it's gone now.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, that's fine. It looks good. And this is also good too, because like there's tricks to this, right? There's always tricks to doing these things. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you guys a couple of the tricks as sort of the wrap up component. And one of them is, oh no, actually, sorry, Ms. Caputo, you have to go. And then remind me about the trick of moving things. Sorry, I got super excited about tricks.
So I kind of went along the same lines as Lisa with regards to a beach day or one summer day, I guess is how I did it. Can you see it?
No, not yet.
Oh, no, yeah. It's not going, right?
No.
Let me see. I don't know. It won't even let me cancel out of it.
Okay. No worries. We can start with you next week. Just because I know we're running up against 5 and I want to be good about and then this will start with you and that share next week. But what I'll do is I'll show you a little couple of fine tuning tricks, right? So I have my boxes, right? And I'm like, all right, I want to make sure this lines up. So obviously I bring this over and I look for that red line on the left. That red line is telling me that that's lined up with what I'm using as my margin, right? So those red lines are great because those are the obvious things. Now, sometimes you may put something in like this and you want it to be in a very specific spot. And as you move it, you're like, oh, it's not quite moving at the right spot. If you hold down the shift key while you use the arrow key, it will move an object in fractional increments. So instead of having something jump, and I'll do something a little bit more obvious. So like if I took this, and let's just make that black, and then we'll take a white circle. We'll make a red circle. So if I take this and I click on it and I use my arrow key, you're going to sort of see it do these jumps, right? And as it jumps, I'm just clicking and it's moving. But maybe I don't want that jump to be so big and I'm trying to get in a very specific place. Now, if I hold down shift and I move it, it's moving it ever so small and slightly because it moves it in fractional increments. So I can line it up. And I can also use this if I'm struggling, I can get those blue boxes centered right on the other object's border as a way to help me orient and arrange the objects, because sometimes it is tough to pick it up and get it exactly right. You want to make small adjustments. Hold down the shift key and use your arrow key to make little finite adjustments. Now, the other thing about the pictures, right? So like if a picture doesn't fit perfectly, one example is the picture I took of myself. You could then think purposefully about, and this is an example of I would do little shift and I get that picture right down there. You think purposely about that empty space. Like, what can I do in that empty space? Well, if it's a dialogue thing, a situation where they're speaking or a thought bubble, use it. Use that empty space for that speech bubble or for that dialogue, that thought bubble. Use it for that if it doesn't fit, right? So that's an easy one to solve. And when you think about the picture, you think about, which way is the character looking and where am I going to put that empty space? Now you may have, we'll use something like this where you say, let's do an image and let's do beach bag. When you do it, you may say like, all right, I like this one. And I'm going to put this one as it's creating the image. There we go. So I'll start as it's loading, I'll just resize it. So like you could put that there, but again, what you can also do is, now obviously you can stretch it if you want it to fit. It distorts it, but depending on what effect you're looking for, that might be okay. Or you want to then put things into it, just like we did with the other objects of layering things. What you can do is you can almost kick this off to the side and say, all right, that's my beach bag and that's a good size. But now I want to put stuff into it. So I'm going to do, I don't know, beach towel. And, maybe I take this one and I insert this one. But I know it's going to be too big, no problem. I know I can crop it, but I might want it like, I want my beach bag on my beach towel. So then this is where I could do arrange, order, like send to back, and that's on that, right? So I can adjust this. Then I can select both of those, holding down shift while I'm clicking, or clicking and holding and dragging across, arrange, group. And I could use multiple pictures to create a single image that might better fit the space that I'm using in that moment. So this picture happens to be somewhat transparent. That's why you're seeing the towel through it. But the idea is that you could come over and say, I'm going to get different things. Now let's do a beach umbrella. And we'll take this one. And we'll do sort of the same concept. And I might even take this one right here and say, you know what, I'm going to kind of size that, give or take with the frame that I'm using. Then I'm going to bring this guy over here, kind of say, all right, what am I going to do? I'm going to line up like that. But we'll send this guy to the back. And again, I can highlight, now this isn't perfect. Group basically took 3 pictures, made it into a group that then fits more of that panel or more of that shape. You could also just do things like when you're doing your search for images, find something like beach and almost take a background and layer the object. So meaning like if I took this, and again, I kind of work off to the side and I say, all right, I know I need it to be that wide, but maybe I'll crop it a little bit and I'll bring it in like this. And I'll make this a little bit bigger. Doesn't quite fit, so I'll crop it again and I'll just bring it down. So now I know that that's going to fit my panel. So now what I can do is now I could take all of this and let's say I bring this on here, arrange, order, bring it to front. All that stuff is now on, and I'll make it a little bit smaller because I went a little bit too big with it. And I can resize it however I want on the beach, let's say. Same thing, click and drag, select it all, arrange, group. Now I've taken all these different objects and I've created them as one. Now, obviously this one now is covering, so I just click it, arrange, order, bring to front. And then I just slide this guy up and there we go. So you can kind of take multiple images and layer them and group them, much like we did with the traits of the character. by stacking them and grouping them, you can do a similar idea with different pictures. Or, like I said, use it as a rough draft, let kids figure out what they're missing, and then let them go take pictures of the perfect thing and use it as a way to get them starting to visualize what they really want and what Google is lacking. Cool. All right. So what we'll do is we'll do like last time. Feel free to work on these over the week, but you don't have to. We will kick off the third session with Kara sharing hers. Hopefully her screen sharing will be fixed. Talk about what people thought about, kind of reflections. Then I'll give you, again, some more time to work on these sort of after having let it set for a week and kind of thought about it. And then we'll move on to the next sort of iteration of possibilities. Cool. Any questions or anything before we go?
I actually wanted to ask a question about this class. When I was working with Google Slides this year, which is the first time I've ever worked with Google Slides, and it was sort of, I was just, I had to do it. We had to put up all our lessons that way, a lot of them for the kids who were remote. Some of the stuff I found, like was shared with me, some I had to create. And there were a lot of things I didn't know what to do, but there was times like, I know you don't believe in bullets, but like for a reading lesson, it might be this poster would come in and then you'd talk off of it. And then if you clicked on something, there'd be a transition. And I tried to figure out how that was happening. And I couldn't figure, I saw how you do transition, but I don't know how to do transition. In other words, are we going to be looking at any of that, manipulating slides? And
yeah, we're going to go into, once we move away from sort of the non-traditional, I sort of start with the non-traditional things like the comic books, graphic novels, we'll go into doing more traditional presentations and how you can tweak things and why you would use things in certain times. Because sometimes you do want to have those things, but a lot of times it's about, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, is the effort to do it, does it add value and benefit to the end user? And yes, we're gonna talk about sort of more traditional presentations next. I like to start off with this because this kind of gives you a sense of thinking outside the box, meaning knowing that there's other possibilities, so that when we actually get to a more traditional presentation, you can kind of sit there and be like, well, wait a second, maybe I'll use this instead of that, or maybe I know that I can have it fly in from the outside. It gives you.
I didn't know how to do that. There was one lesson somebody shared with me and they did it. And so I kept copying their lesson and trying to manipulate it. So because it sort of was nice, working with second graders to be able to paste and then have this come in, but I couldn't figure it out on my own. I Googled it. I did everything. I couldn't even make a line curve,
It's all good. Like I said, we're going to get to that when we get to more traditional presentation styles. I just like to start out with this stuff just to get people's minds around the concept that you can use this platform for something sort of you totally didn't expect to use it for, because then it makes creating a normal presentation more like, oh, hey, I could do a bullet point, but you know what? I could also do this, or this, and gives you the sense of possibility. Cool.
Thank you. I'm great.
We're good. All right. See you next week. Thank you.